So for this one, I'm using this other walkthrough from which the lesson plan for yesterday was made. And so this one is just sort of like a stripped down version where it's just like fewer fewer talking about stuff and more just like individual steps. But aside from that, it's the same thing, same screenshots and everything. Okay, let me get this guy all good to go. Where should I start with this? Mongoose starter, that looks promising. All right, so I'll clone it down on my desktop. And then I'm starting off with this guy. Yep, check out that, yep, check out B. Let me make sure I'm in the right place, and then I'll slack out the command for that if you do want to code along. Mongoose starter. So I think I should be able to fire this up. Ah, great. So I'm getting this first question for you guys. I'm getting this cannot find module express. What haven't I done yet? No? It's not that. Doesn't have anything to do with Mongo.
You
Brendan?
have to install it first and save it.
So what am I going to type?
npm can you do the save command first? So you have to install.
I'm actually just going to do npm
npm
install.
install,
That's
yeah.
just npm install. I already have a package.json. So all I need to do is npm install. And then it's going to go through that package.json and install whatever's in there.
Right.
So I can do this and just hang out. Yep. Nara?
So you have to every time you add express handlebars, you have to do it all over again and do that install.
So when you're adding something to package.json, then you need to do npm install -- save and then express handlebars or whatever it is you're adding. That will both install it and add it to the package.json. So all you need to do is npm install save, and then it'll be installed. You don't need to do npm install again. All right, so here's all of this stuff. Any other questions about that npm thing?
What was in there before you started?
Nothing. There was no node modules folder.
Oh, so that makes the
Yep. And like if I look at the files on here, you can see that, yep, there was no node modules folder. And that's because node modules is get ignored in here, because if it wasn't, then anytime someone clones this down, they'd clone down like 8 million files, and I really don't want them to do that. Instead, they can just generate all of them by doing npm install. Oof, I'm all jittery from this Mountain Dew. Yeah, this isn't coffee, this is like antifreeze straight to my system. That's what it looks like anyway. Okay, cool. So here's all this. Let me try firing this guy up again. Make sure I'm in the right place. NodeMon. It's alive. Localhost 2001. And there we go. Okay, and so I think what I have here is just a whole bunch of different... yeah, this doesn't do anything with the database. This is just getting stuff from this seed data file, and that's it. So this is the right place to be. If you want to catch up with me or check out to the same place, it's not going to be that. It's going to be get checkout. There we go. There we go. Okay, cool. So first step. Let's see, I need to install Mongoose. So this is where I'm going to do npm install save Mongoose. And then that's going to add it to my package.json. It's going to add it to the node modules folder. And now pretty much anytime you do npm install save, you're also going to require that thing that you installed somewhere. So in this case, I'm going to do it in my connection file. I'm going to do var mongoose equals require Mongoose. And that is going to load it from my node modules folder. Anissa?
So Mongoose lets us add schema to a database, right?
Yes.
So without it, we wouldn't be able to do anything.
Right. So Mongoose is like, So Mongoose is to Node and MongoDB the way Active Record is to Ruby and Postgres. So Active Record comes between Ruby and Postgres. Mongoose comes between Node and MongoDB. So they're both still like sort of the middle thing between the server and the database.
Otherwise, you have to write out straight the SQL stuff.
Yeah, actually, I don't even know how you talk to Mongo without using Mongoose. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how that works.
Because it's not SQL. So.
It's not SQL, it's something else. Yeah, Mongoose is its own weird thing. Alright, so next step in here is I'm going to create this schema. Candidate schema equals new mongoose.schema. And then in here, I'm going to put the different fields I want. I'm going to have name, which is a string, and I'm going to have year, which is a number. And then whenever I define a schema, I'm also going to do this thing, this mongoose model candidate schema. And so this thing right here, this is necessary. This doesn't actually like modify the database at all. This doesn't do anything with the database. This is just sort of saying like, hey, I might want to create the schema in the database. This is where I actually do put the schema in the database. So this is just sort of setting it up. This right here is saving it. And it's telling Mongo, I'm going to be creating a new model called candidate that's going to be using this schema up here. If I did wombat, then it would create a new model called wombat that has a name and a year. I don't want that. I want candidate. But I can call this anything I want. And then the last thing is going to be to actually connect to the database. MongoDB ://localhost when resident. Okay, and now I know this worked if I just look over at Node and I don't get any errors, but I get an error. What do I need to do when I get this error? Connection refused, con refused. Okay.
Is that when you put the node mod?
No, not with NodeMon.
Mongo?
Yeah, it can't connect to my database. Connection refused, it can't connect to my database. Whenever you get this error, it's always going to look exactly like this. It's because you don't have mongod running. So I'll fire up mongod and then forget about it. So now if I restart this, there we go. And so now it seems to be connecting to Mongo, or at least it's not throwing any errors. So I'm just going to assume that I'm good, and I'm going to keep on going. In some of the other classes, we did this like mongoose on connect or whatever it is. You don't have to do that. That's just if you want it to like print out a message at you when it connects saying like, hey, you connected. You don't have to do that. And so I'm not doing that here. Kyra.
So does this make it so that when in our terminal, like it shows that as a collection, or when
Not
we
yet.
get from scratch,
Nope.
we have to?
That's down the road. Okay, so the next thing is going to be doing something with this seed data. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm no longer just going to be importing this seed data right in here anymore. This connection file is literally just being used to connect to the database. And so with that, the only thing I'm going to export from here is Mongoose. And I'm going to come back to this in a second and talk about why I'm doing that, why I'm doing module exports Mongoose. But now I'm going to create a new file. This is going to be my seed.js file. And then in here, I'm going to require that connection file I just made. If I type it like this, it's not going to work. Why not? This is going to throw an error. Yes,
Yeah.
// Raise your hand. But yes, // If I just left it as connection, it would look for a node module called connection, which I don't have. I went // that tells it to look for a file. And then in here, I'm going to load that seed data. So this is loading this seeds.json file. And I'm just going to stop there, and I'm just going to do console.log seed data and make sure that this is loading everything correctly. So I'm going to do node db seed.js. And I should see, yep, there we go, Steve, Barry, and W. So this is just hanging right now. What should I do? Like, I'm not getting my terminal prompt. Yeah, exactly, just exit, that's fine. It's only gonna exit for you if there's process.exit somewhere in here. So if I run it again, now it closes just fine. But without that process.exit, it just hangs, so you need to Control-C yourself. There's like literally no difference, it's just one way you have to do it yourself, one way you don't, and that's it. Okay, so I can see that it's loading that successfully. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load up that candidate model that I made. Mongoose.model candidate. If I change this to Wombat, then what in here would I have to change to Wombat? Yeah, exactly. Then I would need to change this to Wombat. So whatever I have in this seed file has to match what I have there. If this is candidate, that has to be candidate, and vice versa. I'm going to stop there again. Well, actually, I'm going to try doing console.log candidate and just see what that looks like. Okay, well, I'm getting a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know what any of this is, but it looks promising, so I'm just going to assume that it's working. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is actually seed the database. So the first thing is going to be to remove all of the different candidates. And then I'm going to do this. Okay, so the way I have this right now, something is wrong with this. It may not work the way I want it to. What's wrong with it?
The sequence in which it happens.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that a bit?
You'd want to, I guess, remove first before you do that, so you have to do the then function.
But I have removed first. It's the line before, so why isn't that going to work? Tony?
Because it's like asynchronous,
Yeah.
so that could run before the candidates are removed.
Exactly. Even though it does talk to the database really fast, it's still asynchronous. So right now, there's no guarantee it's going to do this line after this line. So if I want it to do line 7 after line 6, I have to explicitly say, actually add these things to the collection when you're done deleting that collection. So I'm going to do then function, and then in here, now I can do candidate collection insert. And this is going to ensure that it only puts stuff into the database when everything has been deleted from the database.
Question, then, is that a Mongoose thing? Is it a JavaScript thing?
It's a Mongoose thing, but it's also, so it's not built into JavaScript,
And
but it's a convention that you see in a lot of places, like jQuery has a .then. I think in this case it comes from a module called Bluebird that does stuff with promises and all that asynchronous stuff. But yeah, you see .then a lot in JavaScript. It's not native to JavaScript, but it's just sort of convention, like var self equals this. Not something built into JavaScript, it's just something people do a lot. All right, so now I'm gonna fire this guy up again. I will know it worked if I don't get any errors, and I don't, it just sits there. And if I really want to be sure, then I can open up Mongo without the D, and then I can do use when president, and then db.candidates.find should show me Steve, Barry, and W. And there they are. So cool, this seems to have worked. All right, so far I have successfully seeded my database, and that's it. Any questions about this part up to this point before I move on? Cool. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so the next step is going to be actually making these show up on the page. So that's going to be my next step. Okay, so here I already have this require connection thing in here. I'm going to change this to Mongoose. So the reason this is necessary is because both the seed.js file and the index.js file, they both use that connection file. They both connect to Mongoose in the same way. If I wanted to, I mean, I could just like basically copy all this stuff and paste it into this index.js and paste it into this seeds.js file, but that's super not dry, so I may as well just have it in one file and then have my index.js and my seed.js both require that file. So measure twice, cut once. Why am I not just like, why didn't I just put all my seed stuff in here? Like, why not just do all my seeding in here? Yeah?
You don't want to reseed your database every time you connect to it.
Yeah, exactly. This would mean every time my server restarts, it would reseed my database. Theoretically, in a perfect world, you would only seed your database once. I mean, like, we're all testing stuff, so we seed our databases like 1,000,000 times, but you still probably only want it to happen when you actually intend for it to happen. Okay, so I just required that connection, and now my next thing is going to be, I'm going to get this candidate back in here. I'm going to stop there, make sure it's working. Yep, looks good. Or at least doesn't look like an error, so I assume it's good. And now on here, I'm going to change this up. So it's not going to render, or actually it is going to render the candidates index, I lied. Let's see. I'm going to comment this out and come back to it. The first thing I'm going to want to do is find all of the candidates. Then, once I've gotten all of the candidates, then I'm going to render this page. So I'm going to paste that in there. Now when I see it, one sec. And then in here, okay, so candidates is coming from here. If I call this candidates from DB, I would call this candidates from DB. That should be all I need to do, I think. If I go look at when president now, I think I should see Steve, Barry, and W. If I do, then this has worked successfully. I have what?
This candidate.
Yeah, you left off the S in the parameter there in the function. Candidates, the first one.
Candidate from DB, the
Yeah,
singular.
line 24.
Oh, thank you. Cool. Appreciate it. All right, there we go. Thanks, guys. Okay, cool. So yeah, I can see that's working. Naren?
Question: how come res.render candidates index? How come it doesn't look inside your node module file? Does it have the dot slash?
There's no, that only happens for require.
Or only for file?
Only for require.
So, okay, so it's just by having restricted nodes to look out and find the candidates.index.
It knows because I told it to right here. This is where I'm telling .render what to do, is inside this app.engine part right here. This is where I'm telling it all these things are going to be inside the views folder, and they're going to use this layout. So just because render and require look similar, they're totally different things.
So if you didn't have that layout, you'd have to put in the slash, this slash, this.
Yeah, I'm not really even sure how I would do it, actually. All right, cool. So this seems to be working. And then the next thing is going to be going on to the show route, which is basically going to be more of the same. So before I do that, any questions? I'm trying to like count to 6 before I move on. Kyra?
Do you mind showing the candidates/index HRV?
Yeah, sure. So I didn't change it at all. It's the same as it was before. There it is. Jeff?
Yeah, when you go to the show page, I was wondering if you could address how it recognizes the symbol name in the URL and sort of
Sure.
surprised that it would throw an error because it hasn't gotten to the code underneath it that explains what that is.
Okay. Yeah. All right, cool. So now I'm going to go on to show. So Jeff, to answer your question, this is just a convention that Express is built right in, that it recognizes anything with a colon at the beginning of it as a variable. In the exact same way that with Rails, you didn't have to do anything for it to recognize these things as symbols. It just automatically does. That's just built right into the source code. So if I do something like res.json rec.params, excuse me, when I go to /candidate/Jeff, I should see name Jeff, and there it is. If I add another thing on here, like age 800, And then I do /age 800. There we go. So it just automatically finds those things in the URL and puts them into this rec.params object. That's no reflection on how old you actually are. Probably like 25, 26. All right, cool. So now we need to get this guy to work. So I've got this var desired name thing here. Wait, hold up. Hold up. Candidates index, candidates, there we go. Okay, so I've got this desired name here. That's just getting whatever this is. So if I go to /candidate/Jeff, desired name is going to be Jeff. I'm not going to do this for each thing anymore. That's back when I had fake data. Instead, I'm going to do candidate find one, and then what I want to find it by. Name, desired name, then function. Once it's gotten a candidate, I'd like to get all that on one line. Then once it's done that, it is going to render that candidate. And so let's see if this works. If I do Steve, yep, Steve for president 2024. Barry, there he is. If I do Jeff, that candidate couldn't be found. So this is all working pretty well. One question for you guys, why am I doing find one here as opposed to just find? What's the difference? You can tell from the name.
Find would give you all of them as opposed to.
Yeah, and I mean, even if there's only one candidate that has the name of Steve, it's still going to give it to you in an array. I don't want an array. I want just whatever the first matching thing is. So .find is always going to return an array. Find one is always just going to return the first thing that matches. And so that is the show route. Any questions about that? Yeah.
If you did want to display them all, if you had many Steves in the database and you wanted to show the full list,
Mm-hmm.
is returning array going to be hard to deal with? Harder?
Yeah, so what you would do is actually basically something just like this, where instead of find blank, you would do find name Steve or whatever, and then it would basically be an index page where it's showing multiple candidates. But it would be exactly like this. Yes.
I don't have a question about this in particular, but I was curious about if you were going to take stuff in the index.js and put it in like a separate config file, I'd be interested in seeing that at some point.
Yeah, we can do that. Let's see. Actually, we'll be doing that in the sessions, or excuse me, the Twitter authentication class today. So is it okay if I table it until then?
Absolutely.
Cool. Today or tomorrow, depending on which classroom you're in. All right.
Why do you have to pass in a candidate from DB for that find function?
For this one, because when the way .then works, this is, so when .find is done, it passes all that stuff from the database into this function right here. If I didn't have this function right here, I wouldn't have any data. I need this function in order to get stuff from the database. All the stuff from the database goes into this function. It doesn't have to be called candidate from DB, it can be called Niron, whatever. But whatever the first argument is in this function, that's going to be all the stuff that came from the database.
So if you have more than one thing in there, the other things will be whatever parameters you set it for, but that first one will be where the data is stored.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the other parameters in here are. I've only ever done anything with the first one. All right, cool. So that's it for just showing data. The next thing is going to be writing data. And so this is where I need to install body parser. Not to be confused with body snatcher. Okay, there we go. Can anyone remind me what body parser does when it's necessary? Yeah, I know. Yeah, like Adrian. I've heard from you. I haven't heard from Adrian.
It takes your
Which weird code is that?
Like your express or whatever the double brackets or weird.
No, it doesn't. That's Express handlebars that you're thinking of. It does do something with making things like processable. Marie?
Is it used for HTML? To, for example, if you're making a form, that way it can like read the HTML.
Yeah, it doesn't read the HTML, but it reads the data that's submitted from the form. So when you submit a form, all that data is packaged into the body of the form, and it needs to be able to read or parse that body. Parse body, body parser. This used to be included by default in Express, but some Express apps don't need to use forms, so they removed it. Express is all about just having the bare minimum that you need in order to make an app work. So yeah, if you're going to do anything with forms, then you need body parser, but if you don't, you don't. Casey?
So then is it essentially like the middleman then, of like running the data back and forth?
Yeah. Well, not back and forth, just getting data. Body parser doesn't have anything to do with how you respond with data. It's just reading data coming in.
So it's more like a post then, would you say? Like from like what we're doing with the posting information out.
Body parser doesn't post information. It gets the information that was posted and then reads it. So when you submit a form, it's submitted in a way that Express can't just read by itself. It's encoded in a certain way that Express can't just read by itself. So you need body parser to be able to parse all that data that's coming in. Body parser reads, decodes all that data that's coming in. Tyler?
Oh, so basically like the HRV files express these. It's not like, because with in HTML, like everything else is in it looks like regular HTML. And I remember when we first did, I was like, well,
I think you're getting it confused with handlebars. Body parser doesn't have anything to do with handlebars.
no,
They're
not the body parts, but forms. Like when we made a form yesterday, to me, it looks like everything else on the HTML sheet. So it was like, well, why can't they read that? But you just said that Express can't read that.
So there's
they want-
HTML, and then there's the data that comes from the HTML. So you make a form in HTML in the same way that you make an image show up on the page in HTML. But how the image itself is encoded, that's a completely different thing. An image is encoded in JPEG format or PNG format or something else. A form's data is encoded in some other kind of format that is not HTML. So the form itself, you make it in HTML, but when you click submit, it takes whatever you typed into the form and encodes it in a different format. And that's what Express can't read.
Oh.
So that's what body parser does.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. I just installed it, so now I'm going to require it. And now I need to do this guy. App.use parser URL encoded, what's the rest of it? Extended true. Okay, so this is boilerplate. When I say something is boilerplate, I mean it's not something where it's like, yes, logically I should do this next thing. It's just something where you have it in there. So this, AKA, this is something that you're just gonna need to not memorize, but just look up. It's not something where it's like, yes, I magically reasoned this thing out. Let's see. So there's that. Now I'm going to create a form. And I'm going to put it on my index page. Form, action, candidate, method, post. Can anyone tell me just in plain English what action and method are, what the difference is between them? I've heard from you two like the entire class. I want to hear from someone else. Well, I've heard from you two, but that's okay. I've heard from you less.
So
Yes.
okay. So action is like the page that this form is on, and whatever's happening is what happened here.
It's not the page that the form is on. No. Charles?
Does it correspond to the app.post in the index?
Yes, it does. Can you be more specific?
So whatever data is sent to the form to the action part of it,
Mhm.
that's where it's being sent.
Yeah, exactly. It's where the data is being sent. So the action is where it's being sent. In this case, when I click submit, it's going to post, that's the method, to /candidate. So the action is where it's going. The method is how it's getting there. So the method is get, post. Well, really it can only be get or post. That's all you can do in HTML forms. But the action is just the URL you want to send it to. I mean, I could send this to like Google or something if I wanted to. That just wouldn't do me a whole lot of good. So I want to send it to candidate. I'm going to do candidate name, and then placeholder name. Basically the same thing for the year, except that's going to be a number. I'm going to call that year, and I'm going to call this year, and then I need a submit button for office. Okay, I want to check out what this looks like, and then I will talk a little bit about this form. Well, actually, let me submit it first. Okay, so I'm going to be posting to /candidate. So I need a post route at /candidate. I don't have one yet. I only have 3 get routes. So I'm going to make a post route to /candidate to match what's on the form. Res, and then I'm going to end up with res.json rec.body. And then let me show you what this does. 2024. Okay, here we go. So this is the body that was submitted with the form. That's what this guy is. So if I were to change this to wombat name, well, here, let's see how it makes things different. 2024. There we go. So this looks an awful lot like JavaScript's object notation, how you would like push something into an object, how you would add something to an object, and that's exactly what it does. So this adds a new object on the body called wombat, and wombat has a property called name, and then it also adds an object called candidate, and candidate has a property called year. If this was just wombat, then instead of wombat name 1, I would just see wombat 1. And there that is. So this is the data that first body parser is like chewing up this data and processing it, and then it spits it out as this. So this is what body parser is doing. Is it's taking the data as it's sent and turning it into this. Brendan?
The use of square brackets, is that a body parser thing, or am I?
No, that's a standard HTML
Oh, that's an
forms
HTML.
thing.
Okay, because I was like, in JavaScript it would be candidate.name if you wanted to access the name of the candidate.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I knew there was a dumb question.
No, it's not a dumb question. It's actually a really good question. But yeah, this
That's
is just
an HTML thing. Okay.
that's an HTML
Got
thing.
it.
Yep. Okay.
Is there a way, or do we have it set up in there that it's like it's outputting as JSON, or is there a way that if we wanted to, we click it that it's not showing up as JSON, but showing up as the other candidates? Or right now?
Oh yeah. No, right now I just have it set up right here, so it's just printing out JSON.
Okay.
So now it's just going to print out whatever I want it to as JSON. If I do foo bar in here, then it's just going to print out foo bar.
And so at that post is anything that is a post.
Yes. Yep. Bless you. Anything else before I make this actually do something with the database? Cool. Okay, so let me change this back to candidate name. And then I'm going to go up in her and make this actually save to the database. So I'm going to just say like var candidate data equals rec body or something. Then I'm going to say candidate.create from the candidate data. So I'm passing in that entire object. Then function. So when I get the new candidate back from the database, I want to redirect to that candidate's page. New candidate.name. And that should do it, I think. Let's find out. Okay, so Juan, 2024, run for office. Well, that didn't work. Let's see. I Wonder why not. Okay, so I'm going to go back, refresh this page. I can see that it did actually create something in the database. It's just my data didn't get in there for some reason. Oh, and that's because, well, let's look at what candidate data is. Console.log, candidate data. Hold up. So this is what body parser gets. Body parser gets this thing. So I could say var candidate data equals this thing. So what I want to pass into this .create, I don't want to pass this entire thing. Instead, I want to just pass this sub object in here. So the candidate data actually is var actual candidate data equals candidate data dot candidate. I'm going to say candidate a few more times just for good measure. So it's getting the candidate from inside here. So if this was wombat, then I would need to do candidate data dot wombat. There we go. So really this guy should be rec body dot candidate. Then I think that should work. Okay, for real this time, Juan, there we go. Juan for president in the year 1. And if I go back to my index, I can see that Juan is right down there. So it's saving to my database. What's the next step? What's the next step? Okay, updating. All right, so questions about this part? What?
Can you break down that code a little bit past the required body candidate a little bit, please? So candidate.create, it creates what you put
Yeah,
the
so
inputs, and then it outputs it to a new candidate, and then you take that new candidate and you add it to the extension, where it redirects to candidate, and then it adds that extension to it.
yep. So if I created a new candidate called Kyra, then it would redirect me to Kyra.name. It would redirect me to Kyra. Yep. And then just to break this thing down a little bit more, what I could also do, this is just a shorter way of writing name rec body candidate dot name, comma year rec body candidate dot year. That takes a long time to write, so I'm just not bothering to do it. I'm just passing in this whole object. All right, cool. Next step is updating. So this is going to be on the show page. Form action candidates / candidate name method post. So this is update, but HTML forms don't have a patch method. They only have get and post. So I can't actually do patch. I'm going to have to sort of fake it with post, which is what I'm doing here. And then this, I'm actually just going to copy it from over here. Change your platform. And then in here is going to be the candidate's name. And down here is going to be candidate's year. And I want all of this to go inside this bit up here, so it only happens if the candidate exists. So let me make sure that shows up properly. All right, there we go. W2000. Looking good so far. Okay, so I have my form all set up. The next thing I need to do is create a post route for it. So at post candidates name. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. Our candidate data. This is going to be a little bit different. I'm not creating anymore. Instead, I'm going to find one and update. And this takes 2 arguments. The first one is the candidate I want to find. So that's going to be name. It's sort of a combination of this find one and create. It's going to be find one. You know what? I'll just do desired name up here too. Desired name. And then the information I want to update it with. So that's going to be candidate data. And then it just follows the same procedure. Then function updated candidate does redirect. I'll just copy this. And let's see if that worked. 2024. There you go, W for President 2024. I'll change this to George. Now that didn't work. So I thought it was going to redirect me to /George, but it just redirected me to /W. This is tricky. Anyone know why? Anyone remember why? Wait. Yeah. Yeah, so by default, find one and update, for God knows what reason, returns the old version of the thing you just updated. I have no idea why, and I think that's stupid. But if you want it to return the new version, you need to add an additional thing, which I think is new true? Let me double check. Oh, I cut it off, so I guess we'll just have to find out. So I added in new true. Let's see what this does. I'll change George back to W. Yeah, now it redirects me to W. So I'll change it back to George. Now it's all working fine. Awesome sauce. So again, this find one and update is just like a combination of this get and or this read and this create method. The only new thing is that it has this new true thing inside it, which is necessary for making sure the new version of the candidate comes back. Okay?
Does the desired name update only the parameters that's in the URL, and the candidate data updates only the data that they put into the input?
Yes. Okay, so I think the last thing here is going to be deleting it, and then I can deploy it really quick, and then we'll call it a day. So this, again, I don't have like a .delete method, so I'm just going to fake it with post. Delete. Okay, let me put a delete button on here. So because I'm posting this, it has to be inside a form. There's no other way to post things. You have to post things from inside a form. Candidate.name, delete. Even if that form isn't really a form, but is literally just a submit button. I'm going to make sure that shows up properly. Okay, concede your candidacy, there it is. And then that should post here. Quick question, why am I doing this as a post route? Why not just a get route? What would be the problem? It's not an express thing. Doesn't matter, I could still use get, it will work fine. But why wouldn't you want delete to be at a get route? Well, how do you get to a get route? How do you go to a get route? All right. Yeah, you just type it into your browser. So imagine if I could delete something in my database just by going to candidates/George/delete. It would be really easy for anyone to just delete every single thing in my database. So that's why I'm not doing it as a get route. That's why I'm doing it as a post route. It's not because I have to, it's because I want to. Because if I don't, that is a really surefire way to get stuff to delete everything in my database, which would be bad news bears. Okay, so this last thing is going to be, I think it's find one and remove. Candidate, find one and remove. Name, desired name. I know I haven't put it in there yet, but I will. Then function. There's not really anything to return here, so I'm just going to redirect back to the index page. Last thing we need to do is get desired name in here. Let's see if that worked. All right, so he's gone. Juan is gone. Barry is gone. There we go. It's deleting. All right, Yoon.
So it's a find one and remove. I think it's like you cannot change the it's just a setup platform.
I'm not sure I understand.
Find one and remove. You cannot replace with anything else, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's just a method.
Mhm.
It's a JavaScript thing or
It's a Mongoose thing. Yep. So this is the way Mongoose named it. Remember, the general rule is anything to the left of the period, you can name whatever you want. Anything to the right of the period, it has already been named for you. So anything left of the period, you can rename. Anything right of the period, you cannot. So I could have this be, Jorge or whatever, and as long as I changed this to Jorge, it would work just fine. But anything to the right of the period, you can't rename. Kara?
Considering that the required parameters in the URL is the person's name, and that's how we delete it by.
Mm-hmm.
So just Express is smart enough to know that anything that's attached to that name it deletes. Or how
It's not Express doing it, it's Mongoose doing it. Because all this does right here is it just gets the name from the URL. Then in here, this is where it actually finds one and removes it from the database. So this is Mongoose doing it right here.
Right, but
I wanna get to deployment before we wrap up, so I'm happy to talk with you about it afterward. Any other questions? Okay, cool. So the last thing is going to be deploying it. The only thing I really need to remember here is whatever it is that we're using. Heroku isn't going to be able to, it's not going to be using localhost /win president. They're going to have their own environment variable. MongoLab URL. So this is saying it's going to connect to this MongoLab URL environment variable if it exists, or if it doesn't exist, it's just going to look for this. So let me make sure it's still working on my computer, and it is, no errors there. So the next thing to do is I need to set this MongoLab URL. I'll just see if I can find it in Heroku. I'll actually go to MongoLab. Hopefully their site's a bit faster than it used to be. Login. But that should be all I actually need to change in my code. I'll just create a new database one here. Single node, free, WinPres, $0 a month. I like that price. Okay, and then I'm going to log in here. I'm going to make a user. And this user isn't me. It's just like a user really just represents something that has access to your database. In this case, it's going to be my app. So I'm just going to call this testerson. Okay, now I can copy this guy. Well, that's actually all I need to do here. So I'm going to push this up to Heroku. Deploy to Heroku create. Give me a good name, Warm Chamber. Okay. Git push Heroku master. Keep your judgments to yourself. And while I'm waiting, I'm just going to look ahead to what I'm going to do after that. It tells me what to do right here. Heroku config set MongoLab URL equals this big horrible thing that I just copied. So all I need to do is just replace this with testerson. I can go in here and do Heroku config set MongoLab URL. Won't work if you have spaces around this equal sign. And that should be it. So now if everything works successfully, I should be able to do Heroku run node dbc.js to seed my database. Looks good. And then I can do Heroku open. And I get an internal server error. Excellent. I think that's because I need to... Oh, that's because I forgot to do a process.exit in here. And so Heroku is just sort of continuing to run. I need to tell it to stop running this seed file. So I do actually need that process.exit in there. Should be a good thing for me to remember for next time. Oh shit, I'm also pushing the master. That could actually have been the problem instead. Mongoose starter, master. Ah, fuck. Theoretically, I would have gotten this right the first time, and to do that, I would have just followed these instructions in here exactly, but alas, I did not. All right, take two.
In instructions, there's an if else statement there. Is that necessary?
Two different ways of writing the same thing. You mean in here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the instructions, it's if process.env.mongolab URL, then mongoose.connect process.env mongolab URL, else it's mongoose.connect this. They do the exact same thing. One way is clearly a bit shorter than the other way, so I'm doing it the slightly shorter way. Cool, and that's it. And here I am on Heroku, and I'm all deployed and happy. Here I am. Yay. Yay.
So the actual year you'll be eligible to run for president.
Maybe.
Did you Google that?
All right, so that's that. So let's take the next 6 minutes for questions, because you're going to outcomes after this, so I don't feel too bad about going into instruction time.
Checking for outcomes.
Oh, check in for outcomes?
Oh.
You saved the day.
That's the case's job that he's obviously.
Hey, it's week 10 now. You should get
One job, Case.
Yeah.
I was just starting last week, so.
Anything?
Creating a partial.
Cam. Cam?
At the end of that URL, what's it, president?
Mm-hmm.
Figure out a way. Trying to get my question more specific than just where does that come from?
Yeah, so it's different from in Rails, because in Rails you have to do the whole like rate db create thing, and then it creates it. Could you guys quiet down, please? Not to name names, Caitlin. Thank you. So in Rails you have to like explicitly create the database. In Mongoose, it just does it for you. Whenever, like if I were to change this to Cam's database, as soon as I run this, it's going to create a new database called Cam's database. It just does it automatically for you. You don't need to explicitly say, hey, create a new database. It just does. That's sort of Mongoose's whole thing. It just creates stuff as you need it. If you don't need something, or like if you're not actually saving any data, it's not going to create schema or whatever. It only creates the database, creates schema, all that stuff when you actually save some data. Mongoose abhors an empty database. Anything else? Brennan?
Creating a partial.
Yeah.
Form partial or something.
Like the, like this guy. Ooh. I don't think I can do that in 5 minutes. It's
Yeah,
not
it's like
hard,
minutes.
but there are just like a couple things I need to explain. Yeah. Denied.
Story of my life.
Oh, that's not true.
Kidding, of course.
So
Santa?
to just hammer that point, when you're creating that database again, is that, I mean, if you don't have a connection.js, if you do it with schema receives, or
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, you could do this. Like, I did this earlier for just a second. Like, I could just copy and paste all this stuff into that and into my index.js. It's just not very dry. I mean, you can put it wherever you want, but okay, cool. That was 6 seconds. Let's call it a day. Thank you, guys.